what I'd like to do is to tell you what kind of problem, and it's probably pretty obvious to you, what kind of problem Anpo had when he picked up all of the sacred relics from Taklung and took them to Rinpoche. What had Anpo removed himself from? I mean, it's really pretty obvious. He had removed himself from his lineage and his source of legitimacy. So how on earth is he going to repair that rift and get himself and his newly founded order, the Taklung Monastery at Rinpoche, some legitimacy? I can tell you about those cool pictures at another time. This one's great. Yeah, I know, I wish I could. But instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is show you using these 3 manuscript leaves that were just discovered last year, very exciting stuff. Using these 3 manuscript leaves, I want to show you how Anpo went about grabbing some legitimacy for himself through trans-temporal means, warp drive kind of. So here you see 3 leaves from a late 13th century manuscript from Rinpoche. Like the top register of the Tashipel painting, the illuminations here represent a Kagyu or oral tradition lineage. The first 2 gurus, which I've numbered, are easily identifiable as Pekmo Drupa and Tashipel. Well, I didn't number Pekmo Drupa, but I figured by now you'd recognize his mutton chops. The next 3 are Kuyal, Sangye Yarjan, and Anpo, the very last one right here. They all look sort of alike, just like they did in the lineage painting. But hang on, who is that? Well, I guess I sort of told you. The guy with the weird hat and the curiously shiny green robe, that is no Kagyu or oral tradition Lama. That's Guru Rinpoche. That's Padmasambhava, the 8th century Indian adept and founder of the ancient or Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, what on earth is Padmasambhava doing right here in the midst of a Kagyu lineage? Well, the answer lies in the fact that by moving from Taklung to Rinpoche, Anpo, as I mentioned a moment ago, removed himself from the very source of his religious legitimacy, his monastic lineage. And as a result, it was incumbent upon him to secure an alternate means of gaining religious legitimacy without an intact lineage. Now, a means would be necessary that was based not on direct lineal transmission of doctrine, like we saw a couple of slides ago, but instead a trans-temporal, mentally configured kind of transmission. And in Tibet, trans-temporal transmission of tradition, those are all T words, would find itself rooted in the life and teachings of Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche. And here we have special reference to the philosophy of Terma, or treasure. Keep that word in mind. And the special relationship with treasure, or Terma, that the Kagyu, the oral tradition, developed at Rinpoche. A relationship that we'll further explore with the second of our masterworks, Padmasambhava as Guru Rinpoche. Now, when we last left the Rinpoche corpus, we were observing that there's a curious relationship between the Kagyu and Nyingma. We were also exploring some of the diagnostic features that characterize the art of the Taklung Kagyu. In particular, its emphasis on jeweled staves, layered stones, and special nimbus features like a rainbow nimbus. But when the Taklung corpus first came to light, back in the mid-90s, it was noted that a number of paintings only superficially conformed only superficially to the paintings brought out by Anpo. Here is one of the most interesting of these later paintings. Like Tashipel, this is a small format painting, which is itself an important Rinpoche diagnostic. Lots from this corpus are quite small indeed, as you'll see when you go into the galleries to see the paintings. Moreover, it seems to bear Shari diagnostics, like jewel staves, elaborately scrolled throne backs, and the Lama's rainbow nimbus, all of which I've indicated here. But there are telling differences even in these details. For example, the jewel staves are much wider and less deeply and carefully executed than their earlier counterparts. See? And you have to understand, too, that this is a scan, so that the resolution isn't as high as it could be. This is from a private collection, and the collector doesn't want to share a high res. The elaborately scrolled throne backs are not executed as nicely, but now they're two-tone, which is nice. And in general, we find a less detailed, more cursory treatment of both the major and the subsidiary figures in the Thangka. In fact, when you take a look at this series together, and I'll show you a couple in just a minute, the lamas look curiously similar to one another, like they're trying to say they're the same being. Now, I don't know this yet, but it's another interesting research question. So it looks like individual differences in portraiture were either not important or not relevant in this case. But there's something even more telling. These lamas, this one right here in particular, dates by inscription not to the 14th century, which the style might indicate, but to the 16th century. And under these conditions, such elements as the jewel staves, the scrolled cushion, the rainbow nimbus, all these things must be understood as archaisms. That is, the later use of earlier motifs. Now, this, of course, begs the question of why such archaisms were used. Perhaps it was done as an homage to an art tradition represented in the monastic collection. This is certainly a possibility. Or perhaps there was something more at stake beyond the persistence of tradition. Perhaps, indeed, such archaisms were intentional. Now let's turn the painting over and look at another key Riwoche diagnostic from this period. This one is not a scan. I did get permission to use the high res on this one. And here it is, a bright orange stupa inscribed with superbly, gorgeously calligraphed ume or headless cursive Tibetan script. Something completely unattested in the pure Shari or Beiri stylistic traditions that we saw in the Vairochana slide at the start of our discussion. Now, what's up with this fancy stupa, and what could its presence here mean? Now, as it turns out, I was by this time aware of another small format painting with a beautiful orange stupa executed in gold letters. And here it is. A bright orange stupa inscribed with, oops, that's the wrong page, and here it is. The finest of its kind I've encountered, It is to my mind, the finest one in the whole corpus. The orange stupa here frames the main deity on the front of the painting. Don't worry, I haven't showed him to you yet. The stupa frames the main deity, and each of the smaller lenticular orange dots frames a smaller divinity on the front. You see him? Each one of these things marks a figure who has been consecrated into the painting. Each one has been consecrated into the painting with the Om, Ah, Hum formula, executed in superb gold letters. Now, the content of this text, however, right here, the content of this text is something even more interesting. For what we have here on the back of the painting is a hymn in praise of the figure on the front of the painting. And in this case, that figure has two names, just to keep you nice and confused. The Thangka's inscription calls the figure on the front of the painting Pema Toltrang, which means Lotus Skull Garland. Yeah, it's going to be pretty gruesome. But he has another name too. It's Guru Drakposhe, or the Great Fierce Guru. Now, who could this great fierce guru possibly be? Well, there's a supremely easy way to find out. Just turn the Thangka over, and that's what we'll do right now. Meet Pema Toltrang, Lotus Skull Garland, mentioned in the inscription on the back. It is our masterwork painting 1992.344 that appears on the front of the orange inscribed stupa we were just examining. And at the center of the painting, you see an exceeding strange figure. Who is this? A couple of answers. From a traditional perspective, he, or more properly I should say Hishi, is a fierce form of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, that 8th century Lama who appears in the top left corner. Although called Pema Toltrang, Lotus Skull Garland in the inscription, the usual name for this figure is Guru Drakposhe, the Great Fierce One, and he's one of Padmasambhava's 8 favorite fierce forms. Now, such composite fierce male-female figures are technically known as mother-father figures, Yabyum, And typically, such fierce forms like Drakpoche right here, or Pema Totreng, depending on which one you want to call him, are associated with the overcoming of otherwise intractable forces, which appear trampled beneath the figure's feet, right down here. We'll see them closer in just a second. This holds true across all the major Himalayan Buddhist lineages. Now, from an art historical perspective, there is some intense weirdness here. For like other paintings from this corpus, it bears a number of apparently 14th century diagnostic figures. Take a look at the rock layer right here, which I've blown up very nicely for you here. You can see the incredible detail on this painting, and this is a testament to Kaz's incredible photography as well. So you saw the rock layer. How about this? The gold-flecked halos of the fierce figures. You see here, here, and here as well, and here as well. All of those are 14th century diagnostic features. So, obviously, this is a 14th century Thangka, right? Obviously, because that's the time to which early scholars of this painting dated it and several others like it. But as with all time traveling, there is a temporal anomaly here. The gent at the top, this one, the one at the top right, he can be identified as the Bhutanese culture, Bhutanese? Yes, Bhutanese culture hero and Lama, a gentleman named Pema Lingpa. Although, you see this inscription up here? This actually says in Tibetan script, Punye Mangale, which translates into Tibetan as Sonam Tashi, and it's a common name. But actually, that's not the name of this figure. Punye Mangale is the dative case in Sanskrit. I know you wanted to know that. And what it's doing is expressing the purpose of the painting. Punye Mangale means for auspicious merit, so it's not this guy's name at all. So scholars made a big mistake there. But the problem here is much bigger than identification of the figure, as you might guess. The problem is temporality, for Pema Lingpa died in 1521. So this is no 14th century painting. Instead, it must date to the mid-16th century at the very earliest. So again, we encounter apparently conscious archaisms, 14th century diagnostic features on a 16th century painting. Now, one question is why Pema Lingpa is here at all. After all, we're talking a Bhutanese Lama who appears in the art historical corpus of an Eastern Tibetan Rinpoche painting. Now, I can't yet tell all the historical aspects of why he's here, even though I'm working on this and have some ideas. But I can describe the religious aspects of his presence on the painting. He is here because, according to tradition, Pema Lingpa recovered something quite remarkable, or rather I should say some things, a whole series of what are known as treasures or terma, which I mentioned a few moments ago. Now, what exactly is a treasure or terma in Tibetan thought? Well, in a nutshell, a terma is a teaching or an object, or some combination thereof, capable of creating initiatory changes in consciousness, even absent a historically traceable transmission lineage. So they work even without a lineage. And so you can see how this would be very attractive to Onpo and his successors. Now, how might the process work? Well, according to treasure theory, terma were created and then hidden by Padmasambhava, right here. They were created by Padmasambhava in the 8th century, and their locations were then implanted in the mind streams of specific disciples. Yeah, especially his two consorts, two princesses, Pemasel and Yeshe Sogyal. So that when these disciples, the princesses, were reborn in the future, they would be able to rediscover the time-tuned teachings that had been implanted in their mind stream. Guess who he is understood to be a reincarnation of? One of those princesses, Pemasel. Exactly. This Thangka, which calls itself the Drakpometrang, or Fierce Garland of Fire, might be seen as is in fact a treasure of exactly this type. Boy, I've got some crazy stuff that I'm going to skip over right here. If you want to talk about how the time travel works, we can talk about it afterwards. Instead, we're going to go to the next slide and talk about the crucial question of what this painting, what this Thangka, what this Terma is intended to accomplish. What is its function? Well, again, in a nutshell, the Drakposhe Thangka is intended to encode instructions for visualizing the fierce figure at the center of the painting. This is that composite figure with two names, Guru Drakposhe, the great fierce guru, and Pema Totrang, Lotus Skull Garland. Now, why might the visualization of Drakposhe alias Pema Totrang be so valuable as to be called a terma or treasure? Good question. Well, as we learn from the inscription on the reverse of the painting, Guru Drakposhe is a Buddha, for he has, quote, according to the inscription, overcome samsara and defeated the 3 times, i.e., he has transcended past, present, future, a time-transcending status peculiar to Buddhas. The result of this status, Drakposhe can and does appear at 3 pivotal points in time: the 8th, the 14th, and the 16th centuries, and in each case, his appearance demolishes any number of obstacles to enlightenment. In his first appearance, Drakposhe is a visualized body adopted by, he's not up there, but Padmasambhava ought to be up there. He's a visualized body adopted by Padmasambhava in order to kill and then reanimate a problematic ogre. And this ogre bore a telling name, Totrang, or Skull Garland. Half a millennium later, Guru Drakposhe appears a second time. This time, another Tibetan adept named Longchenpa, who I can't tell you about today, uses its capabilities to overcome a pack of demons by crushing their skulls. In the 16th century, the fierce guru appears for a third time, and now it's our friend, the Bhutanese Lama Pema Lingpa, who employs the visualization. However, we know of no instance when Pema Lingpa adopted the Drakposhe body to overcome some sort of skull-oriented obstacles in accordance with Padmasambhava's model. Instead, textual records state that he used this meditation to, quote, survey all 5 of the Buddha families. That is, in Buddhist thought, holistically to perceive the totality of psychological types, because the 5 Buddha families are understood to encompass all of that. And accordingly, interestingly, Pema Lingpa's vision has a specific name. It's called the 5 families of Totrang, or Skull Garland. How many colors do you see here? 5. Maybe 6. Let's see, white, green, blue, yellow, red, blue, white, blue. Okay, yeah, so those are the 5 families. Go to the stupa, B60, B212, up in the Himalayan galleries, and you can get more information about those 5 families. Here, in the stupa upstairs, they appear as Buddhas. Here, they appear as skulls on the skull garland. Now, what's more, these 5 families are mentioned in the Thangka's inscription in conjunction with a verbal formula called a mantra that combines both Nyingma elements, that is, ancient ones elements, as well as non-Nyingma elements too. And by combining these 2 formula, something remarkable happens. The Thangka maps Padmasambhava's teachings onto the well-known 5 Buddha schema that you see in that stupa upstairs, and that lineages such as the Kagyu were very interested in. So again, there's this curious Rinpoche combination of Nyingma Terma teachings with what other systems practiced, like those of the Kagyu. Just what we saw unfolding in the lineage depicted on those manuscript leaves from Rinpoche that we saw a few minutes ago. Remember those? Now, all of this is quite heady, whether you'll pardon the pun. Yeah, that was really bad. I'm all scully. All of this is quite Scully, whether you like history or science fiction, or especially art. And since that's what we're focusing on here today, let's take a closer look at Drukposhe himself. Oh, this is fun. This is a good one. In this slide, I've zoomed into the right side of the painting. Here, the first thing you'll probably notice is the black scorpion that the central figure is brandishing. You see him? Kinda scary. This is Drukposhe's favorite weapon, and if you look closely, you'll see that the scorpion is consuming a naked human head first. See that? Those eyes on its back, do you see them? Wait for the creepy. These are the scorpion's children. Oh, yeah. You'll also see, happily, there's another weapon right here. You'll see another weapon in his upper hand. This weapon is called a kartvanga. Oops, boy, that really boomed. It's called a kartvanga and consists of a trident under which 3 heads in different stages of decomposition appear. See the trident? Starting to decompose, super decomposed, and now it's a skull. Now, in Vajrayana thought, these 3 heads symbolize the 3 bodies of a Buddha. They're called the truth, enjoyment, and transformation bodies. You don't need to remember that. But it's these bodies that allow Buddhas to travel through the 3 times, past, present, and future, which is one of the symbolic valences of the trident, past, present, and future. Now take a look at those pointy blue wings. See them right there? These are a diagnostic for Nyingma deities. So wherever you see pointy wings, you're always looking at a Nyingma deity. And on those wings, do you see this? Flaming golden gems. Now, unfortunately, as you can tell, the Thangka has suffered some significant paint loss on this right side, which makes it a little difficult to see what's going on behind Drukposhe. But if we move to the other side, we can see still more. Again, 2 of Guru Drukposhe's arms hold weapons. His upper arm brandishes a vajra, or a dorji in Tibetan, the stylized thunderbolt, whose power to generate enlightenment in this very life lies at the heart of Vajrayana, or esoteric Buddhist thought and practice. There's the vajra right there. There are more vajras that bespeckle Drukposhe's wings, blue and pointy Nyingma style. See the vajras? There. Gold dust on the wings of a moth. Who knows that reference? In his lower hand, Drukposhe holds a sword thrice encircled by golden flames. It indicates the power to separate truth from the multifarious illusions that cover it. And as fate would have it, under his wings and behind his arms are 3 coverings that symbolize different aspects of the coverings of illusion. They have been stripped away to form a triple cape, as if by a sword. The easiest one to see is the inner cape. See it right here? Uh-oh. It's a flayed human skin. See the hand and the arm? And then the pink of the, I guess the inside of the skin, kind of gruesome. And then just inside to the left of the flayed human skin is something else, almost as gruesome. Can you see what this is? This is a flayed elephant skin, the white being the skin. And if you go up here, you can see a little bit of the eye, and see this right here? Right there in that area, and then going up behind his arm. That's the elephant's bloody trunk that has been flayed. Wow, really fierce. Now the outermost cape right here, it looks to me like a formal red and gold textile, but despite multiple viewings and causes incredible photography, I still can't say exactly what it is, but I'm working on it, which sometimes is the best you can do. Okay, so now that we've looked at Drukposhe's 2 sides, let's zoom into the central image and see what's going on there. Now, the first thing that will draw your attention is the fact that Drukposhe is, he's not one being, but he's 2 beings at once. 2 fearsome beings whose union generates the power to overcome obstacles to enlightenment. As I mentioned a few moments ago, such images are called yabyum, or mother-father images. And symbolically, they suggest the union of apparent opposites that catalyzes enlightenment in the Vajrayana tradition, opposites like emptiness and appearance that we just talked about. The garments you have seen before, but please do note the female's stylish leopard skin skirt, the male's stylish, equally stylish tiger skin, and the delicate, almost lacy ornaments on her ankles and as her belt and her necklace. Well, they do look kind of lacy, but don't let their delicate appearance fool you. The jewelry's made from human bone, like the bone apron up in the Himalayan galleries. So if you want to see one of these things up close, again, the galleries are the place to go. Her right hand wraps around the male's body, and it grips a chopper, while her left hand holds a skull cup. A skull again. She's got 3 eyes, 1, 2, and you don't see the third, a skull crown, and an extra boar's head. See right there? And these glyph her ferocious nature. Now, Drukposhe himself is even more elaborate, because he's got 3 heads, 1, 2, and 3, each with a crown of 5 skulls. And so you do see the green eyes from his third head right there? That's what those are. Each one of these iconographic elements encodes different capacities that Drukposhe can use to overcome otherwise inimical forces. But what inimical forces are we talking about? Well, we can see them just below his feet in the next slide. Aha. Now let's take a look at who Drukposhe is using his powers against. Here you see a series of 10 figures upon whom Drukposhe is trampling. They include 3 snake-tailed Naga-like figures, including one who, and again, wait for the creepy, has eyes all over his body. This may be Rahu, but I'm not totally sure. A blue Naga figure looks straight up at Drukposhe, while a green-bodied figure to the right seems to look up, hands together in submission and supplication. Something like that. There are 3 smaller dark blue figures, 2 naked figures, 1 light blue on the right and 1 white on the left, and the most interesting one, this guy, right here. The truth is, I don't know who it is, but I have 2 hypotheses. I haven't confirmed them, so I can't share them with you in detail, but suffice it to say at this point that I think this is a historical figure with whom either Pema Lingpa or his 14th century predecessor Longchenpa had significant truck. I've got a couple of options, and I don't want to tell you their names because I'm not sure, but I've got it narrowed down. And if I can confirm any of this small red-cloaked figure may hold the key to situating this visionary artwork in actual history, that is, in time. Much in the same way that our Tashipel painting melds the visionary and the ordinary worlds in one artwork, concentrating them both in one painting that encompasses both ends of the visionary-ordinary spectrum. Now, next slide. Now, the power to defeat such formidable obstacles must itself be formidable. And so it must be protected, warded, and guarded. And that's the function of the figures in the lower register of the Drukposhe painting. At the left, you see a red Heruka as guardian, brandishing his Vajra and scorpion to ward off the Terma. There's his Vajra and his scorpion. A similar red Heruka, by the way, Heruka means blood drinker in some Tibetan translations, appears on the right, and this time he is in conjunction with his female counterpart. And in the center, maybe most excitingly, what you see is 2 Dakini, skywalkers, like Simhavaktra in our galleries, under whose auspices the mysterious script Terma are written in can be decoded. So Dakini decode and unlock Terma script. Now their presence here is not unexpected at all, for Pema Lingpa's main activities after recovering a treasure, or Terma, were twofold. In the first place, he would appoint guardians over the Terma, ferocious ones, and then he would interact with skywalkers to decode the Terma that he found. Interact. So below the two dakini in the center of the painting, you see an example of the Terma script. Here it is right there, in comparison with actual Tibetan printed script. It resembles classical Tibetan, as you can see, but it inverts and distorts the letters so that none but those predestined to be treasure finders or tertons, like Pema Lingpa, could transcribe, decode, and transmit them. Now, from an art historian's perspective, these Rinpoche paintings really are a dream come true. Actually, you could argue that same thing from a Buddhist perspective too, but that's another talk. Suffice it to say that once you start looking at these things, they start to come out of the woodwork. The images you see in this slide were published in the Secret Visions of the Fifth Dalai Lama many years ago, but were not treated as products of a distinct tradition in that volume. But by now, you can see that this painting quite obviously belongs to the same corpus as Dragpoche. Take a look at the two figures in the center. The first is Padmasambhava again. No, by center, I mean right here. Take a look at those figures, and the first one is Padmasambhava again. And right underneath him, you see another Tertan, a generation older than Pema Lingpa, a guy named Ratna Lingpa. Are you familiar with the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Ratna Lingpa is supposedly the guy who discovered the Book of the Dead, which was a terma. So that's him. Now, all of this visionary history is quite interesting, but the question will obviously arise. How might the teachings be transmitted beyond the discoverer in actual practice, in the ordinary so-called real world of name and form? Now, as it turns out, this question opens up a vast new field for exploration, and one that, as far as I know, is unique in the extant Himalayan art historical corpus. For along with the Thangka itself, a whole set of smaller but definitely related objects have found their way into Western collections. These objects are typically called tsakali, or initiation cards. And again, typically, they feature a single deity and are presented by the teacher to the student when the latter is initiated into the meditation on that deity. So the teacher initiates the student and gives them a card. This is what you meditate on. In this slide, you see one of my favorite tsakali, which was published years ago in that same volume, Secret Visions of the Fifth Dalai Lama, and it features someone that you may know well. This is Simhavaktra Dakini, perhaps looking even more terrifying than our own. Simhavaktra in the Himalayan galleries. There are two other important items to note about her. First, if you turn her over, you'll be able to predict what you see. Any guesses? Orange stupa, exactly. It's that red-orange stupa, the Rinpoche diagnostic. Second, you can see how Simhavaktra, the tsakali, the initiation card right there, almost precisely reflects Simhavaktra in the Thangka. I mean, there are differences, but you can see that they are very, very, very close. In fact, so close as to suggest either the presence of a school or one hand doing that work. So what it means is that what this tsakali actually means and what it is it represents one member of the company or mandala depicted on the Thangka, one member of that company. And as we might expect, if these various tsakali are components of a mandala, then it might be likely that others of its kind exist. And then when I started shaking the tree, this is what fell out. Very different qualities, obviously, but all from the same set. Here you see 4 more examples of the exact same kind of tsakali we saw represented as Simhavaktra in the previous slide. 5 of them, straight flush. And in fact, they are the key, for it is tsakali that would actually be used on the ground in actual practice to transmit visualization instructions from teacher to student. They are the practical means of transmitting complex visualization teachings through time, not as a composite mandala painting, but rather as components of a collapsible mandala made out of cards that can be broken down and reconstituted at will. Now, of course, if such a thing exists, I would have to show you an example of such a thing. Happily, I was in New York a few weeks ago and got to see the Met's reinstallation, which is good in some ways and open to criticism in others, but that's another talk. Here you can see there is a precedent for precisely such a card-constituted mandala. This is the Met's recent reinstallation of an older set of tsakali, which for me raises the interesting possibility of researching this entire mandala and perhaps even reuniting some of the elements of it. Something that, given the scope of the corpus at Rinpoche, could provide some dramatic insights that have heretofore been unavailable. We're almost done. Last slide. So with this rather optimistic research assessment in mind, I'd like to sum up our findings today. We've gained insight into 3 different strata of Rinpoche art, especially as represented in Asian Art Museum masterworks, which I've represented here. A 14th century horizon, a 16th century horizon. Oh, I didn't show you this one. That's the next presentation. And then a subsequent 17th century horizon, which so far is not represented in our collection, much to my chagrin, and this is a situation I want to remedy as soon as possible. We've seen how these artworks function to transmit teachings and indeed identity across temporal boundaries, from the early lineages to mentally discovered treasure texts. From reincarnating lamas to the visualized bodies of tantric adepts, Thangka art plays a critical role in the visualization-oriented Vajrayana meditation practice. So, this Rinpoche corpus allows us unprecedented and literal insight into the workings of the tradition from its own perspective. Now, what is more, from the scholarly or museum perspective, we here are doing something quite pioneering. We aren't merely uniting the various components of a set of fragments. Again, given the scope of the corpus, which is almost 90 paintings right now, we have an unparalleled database of visionary art that unfolds over time in a quite specific historical context, and we have it right at our fingertips. But in fact, it's a stimulating irony to me that we can do this kind of very close, very rigorous art historical research only with the Taklung and Rinpoche traditions. After all, Taklung and Rinpoche are full of time travelers and telepathically transmitted teachings set to put our plodding, rational, three-dimensional minds into an apoplectic fit. But, as Padmasambhava might say, perhaps that's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Thank you.